Is grief holding you back, and how to heal your hurt? I was going to say good evening. Hello, welcome to another keep. My name is Will Perry. This is another Keeping the Conversation Alive video. How you doing? I'll get rid of that. So, is grief holding you back? That's an interesting one. You might not have thought it if of your kind of issues in terms of grief. So let me put a different perspective on that, if I may, because hindsight is easy. It's easy to see things and look back at them and go, that's why I was stuck. That's why I was, it's hindsight is an easy thing, isn't it? But you don't have it in the now, in the moment. So I thought of this in terms of my personal grief and I was going to say very real rather than metaphorical, but it's not metaphorical. It's all real. I'll explain more as I go on. When my sister died. So some of you know that in 2004 my sister was on holiday. Maybe you don't know the details, but she was on holiday overcoming a terrible hysterectomy. She had complications from it. She was only 36. And she thought, bugger it, as she often did, and put things on a credit card to to enjoy the moment, which was a lovely thing. I went to Thailand. She'd been to the East Coast, before, and then she went to the West to, at that time, a relatively new and untouched resort called Khao Lak, which was a lovely place. But she was there on Boxing Day, 2004, Boxing Day, tsunami. That's why I have the tsunami painted on my arm, and my sister and our favourite place. So that's I did that quite a few years later when I was more comfortable with the emotion of that, and I recently put that picture up next to on my desk, which is a lovely thing. And when I say more comfortable with the emotion, because the emotion of losing somebody close to you. Or I see people who lose babies. Who it's just an awful thing, and grief isn't comparable. You can't compare somebody's grief. Or that must be worse. Or it's just grief is grief, and it can be grief over. And the reason I'm sharing this, it can be grief over trauma, grief over things that happened years ago, grief over something that you want to be or become, but it hasn't, something that you're missing from or missing out on. So there's so many different stages of grief, and from shock, disbelief, anger, resentment. I often say to people, because I feel like I've got death doesn't bother me in terms of I don't want to die because I've got little ones and nobody wants to die, I hope. But the people who have either grief or have a shorter life expectancy, it's like inevitable. I've got a different perspective of life and mortality, and to some extent, I'm using that as a strength and It's just something that I kind of appreciate in a different way, perhaps to the most of us, because most people when you're suffering from grief, and I felt this most acutely at the beginning, was that people, how are you doing? Great, that's nice. Engage with somebody that's suffering from grief. I can remember once in my training and development place that I was in for the year immediately after it happened. I joined a month, and then after a month, my sister died. So it was, in that year, it was a turbulent year for my emotions. And I can remember 6 months in my kind of the person I was under the wing of, kind of effectively said, "Are you over it now?" And it's like. You are you are not a people person, are you? Astounding. I remember one woman who worked it was kind of within the family, within my wife's family, worked with Samaritans, and she, how are you doing? How was she? Asked, what was your sister like? What was the name again? Hannah. It's like, what did she do? And I can remember it was so lovely that when somebody engages with you. Because most people treat you like a leper. I don't mean that disrespectfully, because people don't know what to say or do or how to act, or it's like, let's avoid it and tiptoe around it. And you feel that, even though it's not said or explicit, You feel that. It's a very weird thing. And yeah, it's such an odd thing. But I understand it because people aren't used to dealing with that sort of thing. But people who have an understanding and who have it's such a nice thing to be able to connect and understand and connect with that person. So there was so many stages and to my emotions, and it gave me, I definitely made different decisions as a result of that, absolutely, throughout my life. Very clearly, I can see it now. That's where the hindsight comes in. But it's difficult to see at the time that you're being guided by that. So I decided in 2006 to quit my, well, 2005, 6 to quit my job, and then 2006 to set up on my own, doing the thing that I've been doing for many years, which was that coaching, action learning, group coaching, that, and take it online. And I was excited by that, and then discovered all these things that I needed to learn and fathom out along my entrepreneurial journey. Yet the blinkers that I've talked about it this week in other videos, the blinkers that I had this real determination and focus as a result of my grief, that I would not do that. I would not do that. One being, I had two boys from two different marriages, two separated, broken marriages, and I was determined not to just go into a full-time job, so I couldn't see them and take them to school, and which is a lovely thing. But there's a cost and an implication from that as well, which for me was financially. I found myself doing part-time work just to make ends meet, keep the wool from the door. Before my business was growing to build the income, so I kind of found myself living on the breadline. Yet I was building that relationship with the boys. But the compromise was, from being a present dad rather than just a weekend dad at McDonald's, was that I didn't have much money to buy them things, to do things, but I was there very present. Anyway, all these things you can see much more clearly in hindsight. And the reason I'm sharing that story is, as I said at the beginning, our grief might not be somebody dying or an impact like that. It can be something that happened in childhood, and that's kind of the people I work with a lot have had something happen in childhood, often that they don't connect with, or the brain does what the brain does best, which is compartmentalize and whoosh, kind of bury that somewhere, especially if it was traumatic. So I've had people that I've worked with that have remembered childhood trauma that they're kind of forgotten about. How can you forget that sort of thing, or that they've just buried and never talk about, so almost forgetting. It's like, oh god, and then I've had many people. I'm in the privileged position where clients have told me things that they've never told another person in their life, and it's a huge privilege to be in that position of trust, that somebody would open up in such a way, because these traumas are very much like grief. It take you through different stages, and when you maybe get it from where it was and unearth it and open it up and explore it, you go through those stages of grief, and it's an incredibly difficult thing to deal with. And in hindsight, you can look back and go, oh yeah, that's why I went through all these different emotions and pushed that way and pulled this way, and so I think working with somebody that's experienced grief in the way that I have helps. I know it certainly helps me help other people with different types of grief, and I don't hold back, and I don't treat people like a leper and leave them. It's an interesting thing, but I guess it's a bit like grief. It's a bit like, in the hindsight and the whole what's it like thing, oh, how is it? How are you feeling? It's about like asking, what's it like to have a right arm? If you have, to all my able-bodied people out there, that's probably the wrong phrase to use, but you know what I mean. No disrespect if you're missing a right arm. What's it like to have a right arm? I don't know. It's just part of me. It's indistinguishable from. I guess I'm right-handed, so I guess that's where I can make the distinctions. But having something is it's indistinguishable. What's it like having a right arm? It's a strange question. And that's what it can be a bit like with grief. It's such a part of you. It's difficult to distinguish life without it almost. but it can help you understand your emotions. You need to understand your emotions at different stages and understand the decisions you're making. And that can be really difficult to kind of distinguish it, to separate it and see it more clearly. But that's really important when it comes down to choosing the path that you're on. So with me and my boys at that time, when I was living on the breadline, for the decision to go out on my own and to leave a proper job, because I was full of the irony of having working in management and leadership, and working with managers, helping them be better leaders and all that sort of thing, but then being managed by a crappy manager. It's like, I'm sick of the irony of that, of the corporate world, and so just like, push, I'll jump out on my own, even though I have nothing planned. So taking those risks and mortality in a different perspective, it's taught me many things. I've taken difficult decisions and had difficult times, but with hindsight, I can see why I've made those decisions, what I was reacting to. I think I can help other people. I know I can help other people in that respect if they're in a similar position and struggling with this stuff I talk about, which is about self-esteem. So choosing your path, given the impact of grief, and as I say, those can be grief from trauma, even though, and maybe it's especially difficult to distinguish a trauma or a grief when it's not a single event. By that I mean, I always considered I had a happy life, a happy childhood, optimistic, all that sort of thing. Yet there was a veil in my family, a veil of kind of walking on eggshells, a veil of a veil of what of what was really going on. It was a facade of what was really going on behind the scenes, which was kind of really difficult and confusing, and had things round the wrong way, which in hindsight makes sense, but at the time it was very confusing, and you grew up with that, and it gave me the low self-esteem that I had for most of my life, and it was like very confusing, and there's nobody out there teaching it, or there wasn't at the time. It's only in the last 10 years I think this stuff of self-esteem has really risen as a real understanding of the human condition and conditioning, and that's what fascinates me. So sometimes it can be a real significant event, and sometimes it can be just that normality, which is sometimes somehow more difficult to identify for people. But the grief can be, and the impact can be, just as significant. And like I say, you can't compare grief. It's just, it just is what it is, and it doesn't have to be somebody dying. So, choosing a path for yourself is really important, and going beyond the emotions that you can have with grief, your kind of attachment to the anger or the sadness or the bitterness or the just the overwhelming emotions of that, and that's something to absolutely learn, because compartmentalizing it and putting it away doesn't work. It bubbles into every aspect of life, and again, hindsight has shown me how that has been absolutely true for me. So my invitation to you, from all this talk about grief, is what grief is holding you back. Maybe there isn't, but if you kind of have this thing of low self-esteem, or you watching me because you have low self-esteem, maybe you've done, I'll press the button, maybe you've done the test, and you know that you have low self-esteem on this score, this self-assessment, this quick and kind of reliable, indicative but not reliable, of your negativity towards yourself, propensity for negativity, sensitivity towards negativity about yourself, then you can identify that you maybe have this pattern within you, and if we call it grief, what grief is holding you back? What are you kind of attached to that maybe would be more useful to let go and overcome and resolve within yourself to heal? That's an interesting question. How does that resonate for you? I'd love to hear back from you on that one. What would you say back to me? What do you notice from this conversation? And it's only a conversation if we go back and forth. So what do you notice? And literally, message me. Let me know. Okay, many thanks. I hope this is interesting. Many thanks. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.